Well,
We
Madam
have them right in
President,
front of us, Trustee Brooks. I don't know if we're allowed to take turns reading them, but we do have them right in front of us.
Ms. Miller, would you recommend maybe we read them at the end of the public comments? Okay, give me just a minute, guys.
Trustee Brooks, this is Trustee Cavazos. Do we have other staff available that we could get started reading on these, perhaps take turns?
That's what I'm checking right now.
Okay, thank you.
I can read some if I can do so with dramatic flair.
Okay,
I would prefer you not to read anything with dramatic flair, please.
no dramatic flair.
I appreciate the offer.
Maybe,
I'll try to do it normal, but I
This is
can't
Lisa
promise.
Lavelle. I have them. I believe I have them as well. Okay.
Okay. So I would prefer a member of staff read
I
comments.
can, Madam
Yes.
President, I can have Dr. Bernier read them.
Okay, that would be perfect. Could we get back to Dr. Bernier to read them?
Yes, ma'am.
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jar, Dr. Bernier for the record. I have April 23rd regular board meeting, item 2.01, public comments on the agenda items. Item 3.07. I had concerns about probationary licensed and non-licensed employees for quite some time. We have tremendous amount of vacant.
Hold on, Dr. Bernier. Sorry. You're just reading anything that's not on the agenda. So nothing on the consent is being read right now, just regular public comments. Is it separated like that?
All I have in front of me is item 2.01, public comments on the agenda, and there are item numbers next to each item.
Please, well, I think that there's a second sheet that has the non-agenda items.
Let me check with Cindy.
All right, so I am going to suggest that maybe we go to the consent agenda, and then since these are non-consent agenda comments, we can move them to 7.1, and I will text someone to make sure that we are prepared during that section. Does that work for you guys?
That's fine with me. This is Chris.
I'm going to take that as approval. Okay, so we will circle back and we will do those public comments in 7.1 instead. Okay, now we're going to move on to the consent agenda. So trustees, I would entertain actually no, we have public comment on that. So Dr. Bernier, would you like to read the comments on anything that starts with a 3? Oh, actually 3 to, yeah, anything that starts, anything from the consent agenda. So 3.1 to 3.23.
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Jar, Dr. Bernier for the record. I have 2 items under 3.07 and one under 3.10. 3.07, I've had concerns about probationary licensed and non-licensed employees for quite some time. We have tremendous amounts of vacancies and have for a very long time. I believe, based on both personal observations and communications from some of these employees, that some principals are not being reasonable or they are just very difficult to please, and that many employees are not getting a fair chance to be successful here at CCSD. I am wondering if there is a way to remedy this serious problem. I am aware of a negotiated agreement process, but know without any doubt that you are letting go valuable employees because some administrators do not know how or do not want to properly train and mentor potentially productive employees. If you worked with the different bargaining agents, perhaps you could solve the problem of so many vacancies here at CCSD. Autumn Tampa. Item 3.10. I certainly believe that these employees are deserving of a raise. However, I am wondering how this grant was determined and why. Since it is marked for the 2019-2020 school year, Why is it being approved so late in the year? Has the money already been given out, or will it take effect next school year? If it will take effect, next school year, then it might it not be more productive and prudent to use that money, $747,673.01, if it is allowed under this grant money to hire more employees in the categories of school counselor or psychologist, speech pathologist, or library media specialist to help with the workload and fill vacant positions, or give this money back to the Nevada legislature to help with the budget deficit because of COVID-19. Autumn, Tampa. Those are the only items I have for anything under the agenda 3.07 and 3.10.
Thank you. So that's all the public comment on any consent agenda items, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, trustees. I would entertain a motion, or if someone has a question.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Did Trustee Young want to pull an item off for separate discussion? Yes, I asked for 3.02.
Okay, so would you like to make
a motion to approve the consent agenda, pulling off, I think she said 3.02? Yeah, 3.02. Okay, for separate discussion.
Thank you.
This is Chris. I'll second it, and I just had a comment on 3.20. And that is the change order for monitor. This would ask the superintendent to work with staff so that we are notified in a more timely manner of change orders as they occur. And also make sure that the categories are correct for where those changes are to be kind of logged. One of them was for $45,000 approximately for fire lanes, and that should have been under government levy.
Thank you, Trustee Garvey. Superintendent Dar, did you want?
Yes, I've had a conversation. Yes, Madam President, members of the board, I had a conversation with Mr. Wagner, Acting Chief Facilities Officer at this point, and he is aware of the expectation of the notification of the board and clarification on the agenda items, and we will make a note of that.
Thank you. Okay, trustees, I have a motion by Trustee Wright and a second by Trustee Garvey to approve the consent agenda, noting that 3.2 is being pulled for a separate discussion. Trustees, please cast your votes by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was 3.02. You said 3.2.
3.02.
Oh,
Okay, sorry, 3.02. Okay, opposed? Okay, that motion passes 7-0. Trustee Young, since you requested this to be pulled for a separate discussion, I'm going to turn this back over to you.
Thanks very much, President Brooks. Under 3.02, I wanted to have just a brief discussion about CCFC policy 2310 that just says that anything exceeds $25,000, that we are now looking at a contract with the National Equity Project to provide professional learning to 10 leadership coaches and 150 school site-based employees to improve the effectiveness of equity and social emotional development. And one of the concerns that I have about the culturally inclusive school analysis that would be taking place at $11,666.57 per day for 6 days in the amount of $70,000 from April through June. I just wanted to go back over a couple issues, particularly with this whole issue of equity, diversity, and inclusion. You know that one of my areas or or areas of interest. And I just had some concerns about this particular agenda item. Over the years, we've done a lot of work with equity and diversity, brought in lots of consultants, had different professional training and development. But I think there needs to be included in this training implicit and explicit bias. And when I was looking through that, I didn't see that in this particular document. I just want to put it on the record that we want to make sure that we need to examine what we call unconscious bias, because that's what's happening with a lot of our students and a lot of our staff in the school district. But we want to examine conscious bias as well. So it's a combination. Thinking about the $11,066,000, it does appear to be a little over the top, considering that the recent request in the way of budget cuts in the Code B-19, are we wondering if that fee can be somewhat lowered? And you're talking about a group of 45 CCSD teachers and administrators that were already trained by Dr. Milton Bennett, who had a culturally responsive academy in Oregon for a total of about $44,000. And that was done. And we've had a lot of our people in the Clark County School District that under Dr. Bennett received the national diploma, and they're not being utilized. The other concern is that we want to look at the cost, in particular with this kind of a climate. We've got a lot of people here, many of your teachers who have been trained over the years, and we tend not to use our people, and we tend not to elevate them to be involved in a lot of training. Some have been involved over 15, 20 years in culturally diverse and responsive teaching. And if you look at paragraph number 3, does this mean every administrator, licensed and professional, as well as teacher and support professionals in districts, or is it just selected school sites for the cultural and inclusive school analysis? I mean, who are we talking about with this? And I guess one of my biggest concerns is that we never analyzed the information from our review. I believe it was this group that came in for our review back about a year or so ago that was looking for the most part at how do we work through these same issues that now we're going to try to expand over to other schools. And we were at the process, from my understanding, of beginning to send out the survey, of course, when the COVID-19 happened. And so we didn't get a chance to finish that. I guess I'd like to say that we need to look and know what kind of data we're going to use to verify whether this work is happening or not. We didn't get through our surveys. We are not looking at our people who are already trained. And we want to look at the results and the data from the training that's already been done by the National Equity Project. So my concerns are that we want to, data is king, as they say. We want to measure the intended outcome. And have we done that from the previous work of the National Equity Project? We also want to know what is the future intended outcome and where's the sustainability on that. And then if we could look at giving some thought to this, maybe with the COVID-19, get these questions answered, get people who are currently involved and people that have been involved in the past, and sit down, because my concern is we've done a lot of these trainings. It doesn't seem like much is happening or improving. And we haven't looked at the data on the work that has already been done. And this is important work. But we want to make sure we got the right climate, we're in a crisis right now. We're in an issue right now where I feel that there are so many things that we're trying to be preoccupied with, trying to even get schools open, trying to get the social distancing, trying to get our staff to feel comfortable even about coming back to school. And I just think we need to catch our breath for a moment and make sure we're going in the right direction. Because what has happened in the past, we're not bringing that back forward in this current model and in the future. I want to add one more thing. I do think this is good work. It needs to be worked with the National Equity Project, but we also need to do it with the school board. The school board needs to lead the way on what we call, much of what we call implicit and explicit biases, unconscious and conscious biases, and do a lot more to model for students, for our schools, for our staff, and our community. And there's a lot of hurt and angry people out there that do not feel, as school board members, that we have done enough to make sure that equity, diversity, and inclusion is a part of not only our policy, but our practice. And so with that being said, I'm just saying that we don't have the backup data, at least I don't, maybe somebody has it, to say what has been completely done that's been successful, what happened with the whole overview training and that model, what has happened with the survey to the Equity and Diversity Department. These things, and I'm not trying to say shut it down, I'm just saying use the data to begin to guide the future work, and that hasn't been done yet. So that's my concern about that, and certainly I'm happy to be engaged in any way that I can, but this is important, and right now we are in a crisis. We are with the COVID-19, and there's just too many things that have not been answered, and there's questions out there, okay?
Thank you, Trustee Young. Superintendent Jarrett?
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, I know that Dr. Barton.
Superintendent, you have
Yes.
to speak up because I can't
I'm
hear you.
sorry. Thank you. Madam President, members of the board, I know that Dr. Barton is ready to speak to this item as he's briefed all the trustees. But I want to make sure that our board members are and the public that this is federal Title IV dollars. This is a continuation of the work. If you recall, National Equity Project was brought in because the previous work and looking at the data for the last 10 to 15 years, that we needed to make some changes. And the National Equity Project was brought in. Early data that we have looked at, I know that the team has, very happy with it. This is also an addition for us to have an opportunity to train all staff around cultural responsive and implicit bias training throughout the year, the rest of the year virtually as well. So it's a good use of our resources, but I can turn it over to Dr. Barton so he can speak to it in depth.
You see,
Dr. Barton?
this is the
Thank
great
you,
part.
President Brooks, members of the board.
Dr. Barton is the equity person in the district, and I've actually met him a couple of times. And he was supposed to be getting back with me, but somehow, we just crossed paths. But I continue to email him and share my concerns about equity and access for all children. And quite frankly, he's promised data that he hasn't produced either. And so the district doesn't produce data in regards to just how well all children are being successful or if they're struggling. It's just, they don't have a way of documenting that they're providing support for all students because it's not happening at the local school site. I'm going to continue the recording.
Superintendent Jara. Trustee Young, to your questions, I want to make sure I hit all of the questions that you had. If I missed something, please let me know. The first item you mentioned was implicit bias. Is that part of this work? Absolutely. Implicit bias is weaved into every single professional learning session sponsored or put on by the National Equity Project. As well, the webinars just referenced by the superintendent, there are specific titles that would be offered to all employees. And one of the titles of one of the webinars is entitled
focal students, equity in the classrooms, and implicit bias, structural racialization, and equity.
Okay, I'm going to stop here and pause for a second because, you know, Clark County did have a workshop and it was at the Orleans Hotel and it was huge. It was massive. It was about Black boys. And it was because, you know, they got the Promise-O money for Black boys or to ensure that equity and access happened. So this workshop was all about implicit bias. And they had a couple of people, I actually recorded it, but they had a few people who were presenting, what were they presenting? Scenarios of acceptance of all people. You know, just you shouldn't have a perception of someone just because they looked a certain way. And, you know, the audience was a sea of salt with a sprinkle of pepper. So we know who's actually providing the resources in Clark County or in Las Vegas, Nevada. But the deal is I don't care who provides the resources. I want to know the data and I want to make sure that you're doing your job. If you're not doing your job, then it's kind of like you need to move over and we need to have something new. This is 2020 and it's time to stop failing our children.
Implicit bias is part of this work from the foundation. Secondly, the outcomes. I know you bring up a good point about data, which data has driven everything that we've done with the National Equity Project. And you may recall the culturally inclusive school analysis. We analyzed data from 41 schools, and you may recall we started with 3 high schools and their feeders. We have fall data for all of, and that includes Arbor View, by the way. So that does include Arbor View. All of those schools in the fall have a sum of a combined weighted score based on the survey responses and the work that we did through this, we call it the CISA, Culturally Inclusive School Analysis. To your point, very well said, when this COVID-19 crisis hit, we were ready to hit the send button on the post-assessment. That was in fact tabled. We did table that assessment gathering process because this emergency hit, and now we are at a stage where we're revisiting when to capture those post-assessment results, because the intent with the CISA is to differentiate professional learning for all of these campuses. The future of National Equity Project, while we've done engagements in September, and now we're bringing it to tonight for your consideration, long term, we're trying to build capacity internally. Whereas these schools are going through the training, and again, with the fall round, we had about 650 personnel that were trained. We're also having the equity and diversity department get trained side by side. So we're building their capacity along the way, where ultimately, when things improve in this area, we build ultimate capacity, we'll be able to have internal people provide that quality training. We've also received, again, survey responses from the field, the 650 that I mentioned that were involved in that first round of national equity training. The rating responses were satisfactory to excellent. Many of their responses were positive. I think that if there was one criticism, just to throw it out there, is that it moves methodically, systemically, and really tries to get to the root cause on a personal basis where implicit bias may be and from what perspective.
Now, see, I just have a question as to why does implicit bias even have a role here? Because, you know, that means that people are thinking one way and they're not willing to move forward or be inclusive of everyone. And why isn't that why are we not looking at the inability of the system to move all children forward? What are they doing at the local school sites when children are failing? And how is it that that collection of data that I talked about earlier for the willful defiance issues, how is it that African Americans are 259% higher than any other ethnic group? You see, that is the issue as to what we're concerned about and how we're ensuring that access happens for all children. We're really not talking about implicit bias. We're talking about an organization that's refusing to provide services to all children. And I think that's what we're more or less looking at, because these children are on a track to get a certificate of completion. They're not on the track to get a high school diploma. Certain children are geared towards lower level standards and that are just not going to make that kind of progress. And other children who are being given the support that the children on the lower level are generating that money, but they're not getting that level of support. And this is just infuriating to me. So let's just listen on, shall we? Talk about the board and its responsibility to ensure that data is happening. Listen to the excuses.
But your point is well taken, Trustee Young. There are other data points we want to gather to see that we are in fact making a difference with this work. And if I miss anything, Trustee Young, please let me know.
Trustee Young?
Okay, yeah, and thank you for that. And I know you all have been working really hard on that. And, you know, of course, anything I can do to be supportive. But there are just, I think this is not to move this out of the way or to stop it. It's to say, let's catch our breath a little bit. We're in a crisis. Let's kind of see what, you know, first things first. We're trying to save lives. But at the same time, you've got teachers and people and staff that really need to be involved in this discussion to, even with the COVID-19 going on, to even infuse other information as it relates to what's happening with COVID-19, as it relates to racial biases. As you know, African American and Latinos are impacted more with the issues as it is with the coronavirus. And I say this respectfully, please don't take this the wrong way, people. But you got people on TV saying things like this is a Chinese virus, and you're having people to say things like we're going to stop immigration now. And if you look across the country, you're seeing that in some of these meat packing and people picking vegetables, that some of our immigrants who are helping in the food chain, that it could get disrupted because these people they don't have health benefits, or if they are sick, they won't alert people because of the biases. And and I look on TV and I see the biases growing. So this COVID-19 really does bring in another aspect of not only what's happening in the schools, but in our communities. And I think it should, with the National Equity Project, this would be a good opportunity to start bringing this information forward. I'm not at all saying stop the project. I'm saying let's take a deep breath, decide which way we want to go, and incorporate these other areas that may get missed if we go too fast and too far. So the data pieces and the question about are all schools going to be involved, all staff, and if so, how is that going to happen? And then I also want to say, how are we doing training for the school board? I didn't hear anything about that. And for the central office staff. I mean, there are people out there that do not feel that our school board or our central office staff is fair, that the information that goes out for consultants and people of color or consultants, that they don't get a chance to even bid, like I brought up last time, that they don't get a chance to bid on contracts. If you got a contract 4 years ago, it stays in place. These kinds of things. So I'm just saying we've got to change the trajectory of how we're being perceived. And it's better if we, what is the old Saint African proverb goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we need to take a moment to catch our breath and bring everybody along with the National Equity Project. I'm very favorable about this project. I know some of the people in it, they do a wonderful job, but I just think we need to look at our contracts and start helping to change some of the biases. I don't want students to come back to class and see a little Chinese girl or boy and then jump and make some statements. And I just want some kind of way that we incorporate some of the current crisis issues into this training.
Was there a specific question that you had?
Well, the question may be just to, if, and I don't know how Dr. Barton might feel about this, and I don't want to disrupt the process or the flow, but just to give, we're in April going into May, give us a month or so to get the names of some people out there that can at least look at this wonderful project that you're getting ready to implement, the National Equity Project, and enhance it. Right now we're in a crisis, give people a chance to catch their breath. We're into almost May, school's going to be shut down, we've got the summer, and then take time to pull in all these other aspects that could make this a model presentation, and get some of those teachers out there that have been involved for years with equity, diversity, and inclusion, as long as the equity and as well as the equity and diversity department, and just make this whole COVID-19 a real important part of this development, educational learning opportunities dealing with the National Equity Project, as well as what we know in our community. There's just so many things, in my opinion, that are very negative, very hostile, very state-oriented about what's happening with COVID-19 that would severely impact our staff and our students going forward if we don't take time to incorporate these issues. I just think we should just catch our breath for a minute and bring in some of these other discussions with people out there that are very talented and skilled in this area. It's a great opportunity for us to improve the climate of our school district and taking this COVID-19 and take it as a learning opportunity for some of our students and for some of our staff. So I'm just saying, just to hold on.
Okay. Sure. Thank you, Trustee Young. So I'm going to go to Trustee Ford. I just want to remind everyone that we just started this work. We started down this path, and the district and the state in general has a very bad habit of changing things as soon as they get.
Okay, so, this is work that should have been started long, long ago. How do you address equity and access if you've never even done it before? They don't want to present the data because it really does look bad. But quite frankly, the outcomes in Las Vegas or Clark County are horrifying for children. I mean, it's different for children who move here, who have base level skills already. But when you're looking to gain access to base level skills, and you understand they limit the amount of preschool programs for Black Americans or formerly enslaved Americans or African Americans or whatever you want to call it, children of color. There's only like 330 slots, and I saw it. I mean, the number was so small. But if the children don't start early and don't get an early start, there is just no start for them. So shall we hear the excuses?
Started and causing a great deal of frustration as a result of it. So I want to be mindful of the fact that this work's already underway. It's a continuation of work that's already happening that's showing positive results according to staff. Trustee Ford? Thank you. I agree with that. That's what I wanted to say first also is that it does make me nervous to slow this down because we pushed for this for a long time and really pleased that it's happening. And so, one of the things that I brought up to the board and the superintendent in the past is that we make a lot of priorities, but one thing we don't do is create boundaries, right? And I feel like this is an example of one of those things where we might go, okay, hold on, we need to pause on this being a priority at the moment, but let's put a boundary around it, which means that we don't allocate the funds that would go to this to something else, and that we don't cut it, we don't put it on the back burner, but we say, let's just protect it for right now. because, you know, we do have a habit of that. We do have a habit of forgetting that we were focused on something, or just allowing like something else to come in and take priority over it. And I'm sure it's really frustrating for the superintendent and Dr. Barton to hear us be like, let's pause, when they're doing what we ask, you know. So, but then that, you know, right now is different time, and it requires some different thought processes and different actions. I really believe that I mean, I wish we had been able to get that data. I know Mike Barton already talked about this, but we were, you know, probably a week away from sending out the surveys to gather the data. But even so, I would like to have I'd like to see it first and have some input into what those questions are, and also clearly know like how we are gathering that data and what we expect that data to tell us. Because, you know, I really believe that it's irresponsible for us to expand this program without data, especially without knowing exactly what we're gathering and what we can learn from that data. And we don't have any hard data as it is, except for that it appears to be working, which is good. But any data that we're going off of from right now, from what we've done over the past year, is from in-person training. And so we don't have any data at all, and we wouldn't have any data either if we had done the surveys about the results of online webinars instead of in-person training. So we don't have that data at all to see even if our employees are able to have the same results. And then we certainly don't have the data to suggest that switching from in-person training to online webinars and during this crisis will work the same as it has. So to me, it just feels like, again, with our budget and some cuts we're going to face for sure, that it's kind of irresponsible to commit this money without any hard data and without, you know, assuming that all of our staff can actually go through the program as well as they were able to under different circumstances when we had the in-person training. So I would like to pause on it too, to first get that data and then to look at how we can make sure that it is including the things that Trustee Young brought up. But I really want to put that boundary on it and say this is still a priority. Let's get that data fast and figure out the next step from here, because I know the board really does take this seriously, and I don't want to pause on it.
This is Chris Garvey, if I could be put in the queue, please.
Go ahead, Trustee Garvey. Oh, sorry. Hold on one second, Trustee Garvey. Did other trustees want to be in the queue?
I just want to be in the queue after Trustee Garvey.
Okay.
Because I just have to put back to you if no other trustee is going after Linda Cabasso, Linda Young.
Okay.
Okay, and then Deanna Wright at some point wants to say.
Deanna, go before me. I'll go.
So it'll be Trustee Garvey, Trustee Cavazos, Trustee Wright, and then Trustee Young. Go ahead, Trustee Garvey.
Thank you. So I had a few questions about this too that I discussed with Dr. Barton, because seeing a webinar where it's not in person, I had some concerns that it may not have the same outcome. But you have to kind of try and look at, I guess, the silver lining of the situation and the crisis that we're in right now, where staff will have more available time to participate in this. I guess as far as data, when we look at this, we can see are the schools that had in training, face-to-face in training, having better outcomes than those that just had webinar training. And so that will help us make decisions on how do we get this out to every employee in the district in the most timely way, money, way as far as saving dollars and that. So I'm kind of torn. I wanted to know, this is Title IV money, so is there a timeline on when we need to utilize this money?
Dr. Barton or Superintendent Jarrett?
Thank you, President Brooks, members of the board, Dr. Jara, Mike Barton for the record. This is federal dollars. These are federal dollars. Title 4A specifically, to answer your question, trustee, Title 4 does allow for carryover. The however is that, based on the situation that we're in, we may have to look at Title 4 carryover in a way to support some other things as well, which right now we don't know. What the COVID slide, for instance. But to your point, Title 4 dollars does allow for carryover, but again, that context could change with all of the certain things happening recently.
And,
Right. I also agree with Trustee Young's statement about new biases and cultural fears, I think, that will come out of this pandemic. And so, do we have any flexibility within this contract as to some of the content and the range of types of implicit bias?
Dr. Barton or Superintendent Jara?
President Brooks, members of the board, Dr. Jara, Trustee Garvey, to your point, I hope I reflected accurately. National Equity Project, they're very understanding of the current situation. I think that while we know that there's a deadline within the board item, I think their reaction has been we want to work with districts and be flexible. So if there is a need to potentially come back at a later time, I know that we've had those conversations, or at least Equity and Diversity has had those conversations with Mr. Chang from the National Equity Project.
If I can chime in also, I think on the webinar, and I am too concerned on the modality of online learning. It's obviously different learners face-to-face online learning, but that's the world we're living. We don't know what that's going to look like, and we felt that the team felt that it was important that we have an opportunity from now until potentially August when we come back to school, that we have this available for all our employees to participate, which has been, and I appreciate Trustee Ford and the comments of the priority of the board and the district, that something that it's a lot, I would say, easier to provide some of this professional development for our employees since they're home. And I know that they're dealing with the students, but it was some flexibility from now until potentially when school starts in August, that we can provide some training online.
Thank you. This is Chris again. So the other conversation, Dr. Barton, you and I had was looking at what has been the role or the participation or the support for our equity and diversity team, so that eventually we will have this embedded and in-house and be able to take care of this within our own staffing. So could you give an overview of where equity and diversity is there? And I don't know if you know this answer or not, but have those individuals that Dr. Young talked about, administrators or teachers that were certified in that other training, have they been given an invite to participate with the equity and diversity team?
Dr. Barton?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara, Trustee Garvey, to your question, as far as the invite to the other personnel who are certified with previous initiatives, I would have to get an answer on that. I'll have to check with Mr. Moeller on that. To your point regarding capacity building, I think that's the intent of this. We're building every step of the way when these consultants come from National Equity to support these schools. Mr. Moeller and his coordinators, his project facilitators, everyone that's part of that team are intimately involved in the work. And so they're building their capacity to get to a stage at some point where they could take that knowledge of implicit bias that National Equity Project has and then become internal experts. Are we there yet? I think that we're not, frankly. So I think we have a lot more training to do internally from experts nationally to stand on our own, frankly.
So one of the conversations that I had with you is, would they be open to when our situation gets back to face-to-face abilities as far as training and workshops and things like that, would they be willing to do that and almost act as a principal would when mentoring and supporting a teacher as they learn how to teach a new subject like that. And so if you could kind of share what your thoughts are on that, and I don't know if you've had time yet to have any conversations with the individuals from National Equity Project.
Dr. Barton?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara, Trustee Garvey, to your point, I haven't had a moment to talk to Mr. Chang from National Equity Project, but I know as we've started this engagement in September, there were multiple coaching conversations with our internal equity department, virtually and in person. But to your point, I think the relationship has been collaborative. I would assume that they would be willing to again, provide that support to our internal experts to, again, increase that capacity.
So I'll let others speak, but right now, if we could pursue those kind of conversations to ask for that flexibility, I think this is so important, and I don't want us to take our eye off the ball, even though we do have a lot of other things happening right now. But this is something that needs focus and continued focus on, and so I would support this with the understanding that we will look for flexibility on how the content of COVID-19 issues and future face-to-face meetings.
Thank you, Trustee Garvey. Trustee Cavazos?
Thank you, President Brooks. Let's see, most of my questions again. Thank you to my fellow trustees for asking a lot of those that are very relevant, having to do with what this would look like going forward, and also, as Trustee Garvey just said right now, not taking our eye off the ball. And this is something that has been basically on deck for quite some time. It's been in the works for some time. I think some of the confusion and some of the hesitation has been is because we haven't been able to proceed exactly on track, and there's been long periods of time in between. Having said that, in my conversations with Dr. Barton, who, thank you for being so patient with answering all of our varied questions, I think would be helpful if Dr. Barton could tell us a little bit about, the deadlines for the webinar completion that are mentioned. But I believe, Dr. Barton, you said would be able to roll out tomorrow if we approve this. This is the one for the different categories of employees. Is that correct?
Dr. Barton?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara, Trustee Cavazos, that is correct. If approved this evening, we are ready to deploy a informational item to all employees regarding the webinar series. Licensed personnel and administrators would complete 3 webinars, again, on topics related to implicit bias and the other topics I previously mentioned, with a due date of approximately May 20th, 2020. Understanding that we wanted to make sure that all employees were part of this learning, we also have a timetable for support professionals, and that timetable goes into August, and I'll read the specific dates. 11-month employees, support professionals, their due date for the item or the one webinar, they'd be required to do the one webinar on implicit bias, but it's due for 11-month employees by August 5th, 2020. 10-month would be due by Wednesday, August 12th, and then 9-month employees by Wednesday, August 19th. The reason for that decision with support staff and support professionals is that we wanted to give them time to obviously do the work if they have access to technology, but again, give them time to report back in August at their site if that needed to be an option as well.
Thank you for that, Dr. Barton, and that just clarified that question. And of course, as you and I discussed in the briefing, also making sure that the employees, all of our employees do have the accessibility to be able to complete these webinars, of course. And to a point that was brought up by trustees Ford and Young, as far as the data that we don't have available, because right when you guys are getting ready to do that, that's when this crisis with the virus hit. When would we be able to expect, Dr. Barton, that possibly that we could be able to see that? I know you and I talked about it briefly.
Dr. Barton?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara, Trustee Cavazos. You're right. So the data set for the post-assessment was delayed, as indicated. We're having internal conversations with the academic team, cabinet. Is May the right time to, again, do that survey? We're having that dialogue right now. It's a survey that, again, just as a refresher for the trustees, requires responses from the administrators at the school, as well as the teachers, but we also dig down into the parent responses and student responses. So we have an internal plan that we're considering that it could be done and get the post-assessment data before the year is finalized. But we're, again, working out some of those logistical things because we want to capture the appropriate information to make that comparison with the pre-assessment data from the fall.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. So we would be talking internal conversations you're having. You are looking at possibly being able to have that maybe by May 20th or so, if, again, as I said, if possible.
Yes, Trustee
I mean,
Cavazos.
I'm just
Yes,
throwing that out as a.
That's correct. We're working diligently to make that happen to stay on track with this project.
Okay, and I do see here that it says that the webinar for substitute personnel would need to be completed by Wednesday, August 26th, not October. Sorry. So substitute, I'm just clarifying, substitute personnel would be included in this also.
That's correct, Trustee Cavazos. I neglected to say that. Substitute personnel would also have an opportunity for this content, and their due date would be on August 26, 2020.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, I just, this is not really a question, just more like kind of a closing comment with the other trustees will speak, is that I do agree that if we can have a little bit more balanced, comprehensive kind of meeting of the minds, with those external people that we are contracting with, and realizing that National Equity Project has been working with us for some time, but also to utilize the talent so that we more effectively end up with well-trained personnel within our own community, within our own central services, within our own schools. Because I do not believe that just with not having the people here that are going to be trained for the future, and I realize that's what we're trying to accomplish here, is that I don't think that our school climate and our culture is going to be effectively changed, considering all the different schools we have, all the different learning styles, administrators, the way that they handle, everything at their schools. I think that we need to realize that both internally and externally, all the different kinds of these biases need to be addressed. Otherwise, our individual schools, they're not cookie cutter. And I hope that we can consider, as my fellow trustees brought up, that we would consider maybe a combination of using that type of training. And that's all I have. Thank you for the clarifications. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Trustee Cavazos. Trustee Wright?
Thank you very much. And I want to thank Dr. Barton for taking the time to call me specifically a couple of days ago. I don't remember, all the days start to run together, and answering all my questions. I guess my couple comments is in a perfect world, I sure would have liked to have had that survey completed.
You see, my problem is we're only talking about the survey data. We're really not talking about the work. The survey data is just how the people feel. And I don't know how they feel, but I can tell how they feel because simply it's not happening for all children. So behavior is an impetus to public education here in Clark County. And for children who don't have transition skills, who didn't have a chance to start early, who no one bothered to go back and catch up, are just being socially promoted. And it is a crime is what it is. But until we get ourselves together and understand that public education is the only option that you're given in life to have a good start, then we can't hold this system accountable, because we have so many services provided because we don't meet the minimal standards. So many people just never get it. We really have to get it. It's really true. And that means everybody has to participate.
Prior to the pandemic hitting and prior to our entire community and nation and world, I guess, being turned upside down. But in my conversations with Dr. Barton, completely understand why that survey did not go out, because with everyone having such, I mean, I guess the word is just trauma, having gone on, those kinds of things skew those results. So rather than move forward with doing those surveys, they decided to wait so that, you know, we got more accurate results. And that made perfect and total sense to me. I at some point do want to see the data. I think that it's important, but I also think that it's important that, you know, I don't want to be simplistic about this, but we've started swim lessons with, you know, and we don't want to just say, oh, well, now that something's happened, we're going to not continue with the swim lessons. And so, you know, we want to pull back. I think that now more than ever, especially with some of the things that Trustee Young talked about, I mean, some of the actual, I'm just going to say it, the ignorant and racist comments that are being said online and on TV are the exact reason we need to move forward with this project. And I don't disagree that we need to have a conversation with them to make sure that these pieces are integrated into the training. I think that we need to be very careful when doing online training. And I just think it's too important to not continue to move forward. And we tend to start things and have the rug pulled out from under us all the time, have, you know, the dominoes shifted, have the bricks changed, have the rules changed in the middle of the game. Let's not do that to ourselves. Let's not do to us what we complain about the state doing to us and the feds doing to us. You know, we made a commitment.
Okay. See, this is my problem. They complain about the requirements meant to ensure that access happens. And when they're not ready, come on now, they're not ready. This is 2020. Civil Rights Act happened in 1964. Brown versus the Board of Education, at least 55 years, 150 years since the Emancipation Proclamation. So, I mean, you know, if we are here as equal citizens, then we should have the right to express ourselves in concern about what's not happening. Where is the accountability, and where does the federal government come in ensuring that the rights of all the students are protected? I don't see that here in Clark County, Las Vegas, Nevada, the entertainment capital of the world.
Yes, this is really
hard.
A difficult time, but we need to be giving these teachers the opportunity
to change,
to learn about
to set
implicit
responsibility.
bias and
Implicit bias?
different things.
Why do
And,
they have to learn
you know,
about
I
what they're
would love to
expected
be
to
able to
produce?
be in on some of the training. The fact is, though, you know, I'm winding up here, and I don't want to necessarily spend money when maybe some of the newer ones would want to, you know, do it, they're going to be there for the next several years. But I just don't want us to do to ourselves what we constantly complain about others doing to us, which is changing the rules in the middle of the game. So
if you were working towards the rules,
I'm gonna support that we move forward, and hopefully within a few weeks get some more information.
Thank you, Trustee Ford. If you could please put me in the queue, I'll be quick. Okay. So, Trustee Cepeda, did you have anything since you haven't made any comments yet?
I was waiting for everyone else to finish.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I don't think. So ultimately, I think we should continue with this. Again, our webinars were the best way to convey information. I don't think so. I think ultimately, I would like to also see what this evaluation form looks like for just to see. Well, again, just to kind of see what we're getting here. But ultimately, I think at the end of the day, it's important to just keep moving forward. Obviously, we're kind of like what everyone already reiterated, making sure that we're taking a step back and looking at the evaluation forms, making sure that it's effective. Is obviously something we want to make sure, but again, in terms of these webinars, I think it's important to move forward, especially in a time where everything right now is online, and we kind of we're have to work with what we have. So I think those are my statements, my thoughts.
Thank you. Dr. Barton, did you have something else to add?
Yes, thank you, President Brooks, members of the board, Dr. Jara. Trustee Cepeda, I think your point is well taken. We did make a strategic decision early on with the CISA tool where we worked with UNLV in collaboration to go through a validation process where they reviewed the questions, codified their, what they determined to be what we gathered through the results, and we're continuing that partnership. And then I think to previously Trustee Cavazos' point about this is one initiative of many to tackle a big problem. So we have a multifaceted approach. Even this June, we're still planning with UNLV, some experts, particularly Dr. Patrice Leverett, to produce more learning, a deeper dive, if you will, for our school psychologists, our social workers, and guidance counselors. So we are still in collaboration on that front as well. But I just want to make sure, to your point, Trustee Cepeda, that we did go through the validation process with these assessment results.
Experience that validation form. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's other trustees that are queued back up, but I have a couple of questions. One of them is about, I know we talked about the pre and the post. What was the time period that this was supposed to be measuring? Was it supposed to be till the end of the school year?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Jara, Mike Barton for the record. Yes, we did the assessment in the fall, sort of like the pre-professional learning. And then the other assessment, the post, would measure, was there an impact to the results previously based on multiple interventions that the school is doing or what they've done. So for instance,
Let's see, for instance, because you can look at the school plans and not understand what they're doing and ensure that they're bringing all students to the next grade level. There's just no empirical data, and that's in the plan for student achievement, which is what it's supposed to be, school plan that demonstrates the access for all children. So, and like I said, when they clump the data together about the willful defiance and the behavior infractions, when they have a 259% citywide, basically, it's a problem because they're just clumping all that data together. They're really not saying what they're doing in regards to changing things.
our review was part of this national equity work. We have other schools that would do it now as well.
Our
But that
reviews
was the
where they
intent,
had all the
Trustee Brooks,
racial
to do
slurs.
a whole school year of professional learning and what that impact is having on the results.
Thank you. So I know we've had every trustee weigh in and say that it's very important to have this post data, but I just really want to caution us that I don't think that it will be meaningful data. I think that the environment has changed too significantly to actually tell whether or not this is effective.
So that's why, really an assessment tool. I want to know, because they're switching to distance learning, it was never really implemented. I mean, they had a distance learning plan that they never really reviewed. And I don't know who was doing it, actually. But I don't know if they had any data from their distance learning plan. So anyways, irregardless, now the whole playing field has changed. So what are they doing to ensure that access happens? And really, because so many children were below grade level, what assessment tool are they going to use for the maintenance of effort is my concern. And I've asked that question, and guess what? I don't ever get any responses. Actually, people just don't bother to connect back with me. So let's just keep on going, shall we?
Because there are too many other circumstances that are happening that I think could impact this. So I think data is important. I am a data person, but I want to be mindful of the fact that this data is probably not going to yield anything meaningful for us to extract whether or not this is a program that works. So I also, I am going to support this because I do think that the board has stated that this is a priority, and I think that we should make it a priority. I think that we should show that we're committed to this work by continuing the work that we've started, and then trying to adapt to the circumstances that we're all currently facing. I also have concerns about it being a webinar versus in-person training. I do think we're going to lose a lot of fidelity there, but I also agree that we have to stay committed to this work and not just allow this to fall by the wayside like we do with many other things. Trustee Young?
Okay, first of all, I just want to make a few corrections. Absolutely not is anybody saying, or I'm saying, don't do the work. So please, let's take that off the table. And committed, you're not going to be more committed than I am because it's too important. What I am trying to say is that there are data points, and I call it, for example, if you're going to paint your house, use that as an example. And it does need to be painted, and it doesn't need to be pushed off. But you got a strong wind, and you got a little bit like a little tornado that's come through the community and the area. And it's done a lot of damage, and you got to assess before you just say, I'm going to do the painting like I was a week or so ago, or 2 weeks ago, and go and paint a house with nails and cracks and all kinds of things. So yes, 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 yes. Please put that down, capital Y-E-S. No one, not me, is ever saying, push this off. But what I am saying, you had a hurricane, you had a tornado, you had a whirlwind that came and upside down the whole house. And now we got to right side everything, look at the best way we can move forward, maybe push back a month to see, okay, is the foundation steady? We didn't get the other information, but are there cracks in the beam? Does the roof need to be worked on? Are there structural issues in addition to what we had before? And that's all that I'm saying. If we did this on May 29th or 27th through July 30th, we are in an epidemic, we're in a pandemic, we're in a crisis. And everybody's mind that may have been on this has gotten flipped upside down. And we need a little bit of a minute to catch our breath, to look at where we're going, to make sure that we encompass all those things out there that are more racist than I've ever seen nationally. I mean, telling people to go back to China, I am offended with that. Telling people who are maybe many of our migrant workers that they don't merit health care, and they have families. even in our community. And so I'm just saying there are too many issues that need to be incorporated in this webinar. Is this the same webinar that you used 3 months ago? Is there new content in this webinar that incorporates the COVID-19? It's already saying that African American and Latinos are more apt to be on the front line of this virus than anyone. And why is that? Is it because they're more careless, or they don't pay attention, or they're not as clean? Absolutely not. They're on the front line of jobs that puts them to more exposure. But you've got people with those kind of ideas. The other thing is the trainer of trainers. We incorporated that quite a few years ago. And are the trainers of trainers being trained? And how is the webinar helping that? Because this is long term. Last year, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, I felt there were more issues of racial bias and racial anger and hatred perpetuated against students and staff than I've ever seen before in the last 2 years. And having sat down to talk to the National Equity Project to say, look, we need you to tailor this a little bit more instead of directly going to a webinar right away. And I feel this is a great opportunity with Mr. Chain and the others to look at content and take this content and make it a lot more tailored to where we are in Las Vegas. Give you just a small other example. You probably saw all of that, and I mean no disrespect, please. I mean, and I know she meant well. When our mayor got on national TV and said, you know, we just got to open up Las Vegas. We got to open up the community. And then I saw a couple of the leaders, particularly with the union, culinary, speak up and say that we're here to protect our workers, and that 12 or 11 have already died. And every child or family probably knows someone that has died, if not in our community, across the United States. So what am I saying? I said, can we not push back a month to May 27th, open, have it go July